Good morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Wednesday, October 29th. I'm joined by our deputy editor at 11 Warriors, Dan Hope. Dan, how are you doing today in the middle of the week?
I'm doing great, George. How are you?
Well, just dandy, as always, Dan. So, uh, obviously, we're getting ready for Ohio State's long-awaited showdown with their not-a-rival, Penn State. That'll be kicking off at noon on Saturday. Uh, Highly anticipated, perhaps more anticipated coming out of the offseason, given a lot of the animosity surrounding the way that Jim Knowles departed the national championship winning Ohio State Buckeyes last offseason, only a handful of days after the Buckeyes became national champions, to go just across the conference, a short ways away to Penn State. Obviously, some things have unfolded over the course of the season that have taken a little steam off of the anticipation for that game, if you will, but we did get some interesting comments from Ryan Day about the whole situation surrounding Jim Knowles this week that you documented for us on 11warriors.com that I would like to get into with you today. However, before we do that, we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor at the 11 Dubcast and 11 Warriors this Ohio State football season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to workday, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They are locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. Now, Dan, I think it's interesting that there's been so much positivity around how Knowles was replaced by Matt Patricia and how swimmingly that's gone for Ohio State's defense and football team as a whole this season. On At pretty much every opportunity this week, I have been telling people to go read the piece that you published back on Sunday, comparing and contrasting the metrics between Patricia's defense compared to Knowles' this season, just to really drive home not only how good Ohio State has had it being near the top of the country in pretty much nearly every respect, but then also where Penn State has somewhat come up short this season. Just to paint that picture, I thought you did a really good job comparing and contrasting those things. I've been insisting on people to go look at that. Now I would tell people to go look up the comments that you wrote up from Day about Jim Knowles this week, because when things are going well, you can tend to focus more on the positive than, harken back to the negative and focus on things of the past. But the storyline inevitably gets brought up here just because of the recent history between these two figures and the fact that there was some rumors and speculation about a power struggle, if you will, over the defense towards the second half of last season, going down the stretch into the college football playoff and the national championship. That speculation ultimately somewhat materialized in Knowles leaving Ohio State to go to Penn State, and Ryan Day finally acknowledged that sort of divide between the two of them this week when he spoke about how there really hasn't been that much communication between the two parties since then. I feel like you would kind of expect that, just given any sort of separation, especially the fact that they're in two different camps, two different teams that both are the same goal effectively at the season's outset, but want to, focus on getting the most out of their own players and the parties involved, as opposed to focusing on the other side up until the two are finally going to meet this week. So I'm just curious what your reaction was to the comments, given all of that context, that we knew this was kind of an elephant in the room, but this is really kind of the first time since that separation happened where one side, in this case Ryan Day, directly acknowledged the other.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Day, very classy in the way that he, handled his comments when he was asked about Jim Knowles, said, we certainly respect the work that he did when he was here, acknowledged the fact that they won a national championship together. But I think it's been obvious from, the time the rumor started that Jim Knowles might leave when they were about to win a national championship, all the way since then, that those two are not the best of friends, that there is some negative feelings between the two toward each other. And I mean, Ryan Day acknowledged that. He said, like any relationship, when it breaks off, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So, I don't think Ryan Day hates Jim Knowles. Like, I don't think Ryan Day feels as the same way about Jim Knowles as maybe he does about a Jim Harbaugh or a Dave Portnoy, but these two are not going to be exchanging Christmas cards. I am going to be interested to see, is there a moment between them? Do they spend time before or after the game, handshake, talking, whatever? I'll be interested to see, if there's any of that. I'll be interested to see beyond that, just interactions between Jim Knowles and the other coaches, the players. How much of that interaction do we see? Because, we've heard it all year from the players as well, that they have a closer bond, at least a lot of them seem to, with Matt Patricia than they did with Jim Knowles. And so, like you said, it would be different if Jim Knowles had left Ohio State to go become a head coach somewhere, in the ACC or the Big 12 or something. There'd be no hard feelings. But it's because he left Ohio State for what could be only described as a lateral move. Yeah, he got more money, but he took the same position at a Big Ten rival, a competitor, whatever you want to call Penn State, right after they won a national championship. And so, I think if you asked Ryan Day about Chip Kelly or Justin Fry, I don't think his comment would be, there really hasn't been much communication. I think that clearly there were reasons for the separation between these two beyond just Jim Knowles getting offered more money somewhere else. I think that, there were, I think Jim Knowles was ready for a change. And I think part of it too, from Ryan Day's perspective, is, he mentioned it. They got kind of lucky with Matt Patricia, because Jim Knowles making this decision to leave at the end of January, like, Ryan Day knew Chip Kelly was probably only going to be there for 1 year. So he was prepared for that. I would assume there had been conversations between him and Justin Fry about Justin Fry looking to go to the NFL. So he was prepared for those moves. Ohio State wasn't necessarily prepared or expecting Jim Knowles to leave them at the end of January. That one caught them a little bit more by surprise. And that's why it took a little bit longer for Ohio State to replace Jim Knowles as it did the other assistant coaches. They got very fortunate. Matt Patricia became available. And as Ryan Day said, as we've all seen, as those numbers you talked about illustrate, clearly Matt Patricia has been a home run hire. And because of that, there's no reason for anybody to be upset at this point that Jim Knowles left Ohio State, because it's clearly worked out for Ohio State. But I do think, certainly going into a game like this, getting the chance to welcome Jim Knowles back to Penn State, that Ohio State probably would like to make a statement about what he's missing out on.
I would never tell you how to do your job, but I think a great question for the post-game presser on Saturday would be, who do you hate more between Dave Portnoy and Jim Knowles after this resounding Ohio State victory? But no, at the point of every
there.
That's why I thought it would be a good question. But to the point of everything you just said, I think it's easy to be classy when things are going well, and things really couldn't be going any better for Ohio State, given the circumstances of how that relationship fell apart. And yeah, Patricia, as well as it's worked out, and this is a point that I made yesterday on the Dubcast and speaking to Kyle Jones, there was a lot more speculation about whether or not this hire was going to work out at the off. There wasn't a resounding agreement. I think there was a camp of Ohio State fans that wanted to be optimistic, but there were others that were understandably skeptical, given Patricia had not been really working in a coaching capacity for a little bit since his falling out with the Lions. But then also, this is a guy who most of the bulk of his experience was at a different level of football. Granted, a higher level, perhaps more difficult level of football to achieve success in than the collegiate ranks, but still just a different dynamic working with players that are at different stages of their lives that haven't necessarily leapt up to the professional level of the sport yet. So it was fair to be skeptical. Obviously, it's couldn't really have worked out any better for Ohio State, and it's hard for anybody to fill the gap of, a lot of people. Part of the reason there was all the sour grapes about Knowles leaving is because this guy's really good at his job and he's going to a rival, and that, or not a rival, as you framed it, however you want to frame it, a competitor. He's going very short ways away, staying within the conference. It's hard to not view that as a slight on the current program. At the same time, it's hard to fill the shoes of a guy that is recognized at the end of last season by a lot of people as being the best at his job in the sport. You don't just easily replace that right away. Ohio State was very fortunate to not only find a way to do that, but in a lot of respects, even improve upon that to the point that this defense is arguably even better than last year's unit was. We still have to get to the end of the season. Last year's unit won a national championship, so we hope to see the best for them as they defend their title this season. But it's certainly the numbers at this point. This is a historically great defense to this point of the season. You hope they would be able to continue to do that. Now, you did kind of already touch on this, but as classy as Ryan Day's response was in acknowledging these circumstances, he did say it, or at least acknowledge that it's hard not to take it personally when you have a subordinate not only not stay with the program and not leave for a better job, but take the same job in direct proximity to the program within the conference. When Ohio State, by all accounts, it was looking like they were more than willing to accommodate at least the financial component of what Knowles was looking for in terms of why he left. So Ryan Day, classy man, as we've set up plenty of times in this discussion, but we know that there can be a petty side to this man. It's reflected in the hang him on 100 comment relative to his favorite person, Jim Harbaugh. We know that when there is an opportunity to make a statement, that he's going to want to try to do that. We've seen that. Whether or not that statement can be made and it's realized with the players, that saying something is one thing, executing and doing it is another thing. How much do you think, especially given that we've seen a more conservative approach for the majority of this season from Ohio State's team relative to the competition as it prepares to try to ramp itself up for the later stages of the season, the college football playoff? It's been a big theme I've tried to talk about on this show during the season in terms of noticing that, and Ohio State trying to save its best for last, so to speak. But we are at a moment now where we're wanting to see the team ramp up. We just saw Julian Sayin attempt more passes in a game for Ohio State than any game under Kyle McCord or Will Howard. It was the most since the Rose Bowl that CJ Stroud led that comeback effort in against Utah for Ohio State. So the most recent game we have prior to the bye week that they're emerging from, we have seen them ramp up their aggression. Do you think that is Ohio State just going to try to continue that theme on its face going into the home stretch of its schedule, you think, and continue that with Penn State? Or do you think that, given he has even acknowledged the element of personalness, if you want to call it that is here with Jim Knowles being at Penn State, that he's going to want to take it even a step further and really make a statement on Saturday? And I don't know about hang 100 on Penn State, but at least really trying to make a statement that this guy's out of the camp now, and we're trying to defend our title, and we're just going to steamroll anybody in our path to get that done.
Yeah, I think the pedal will be pushed to the floor this week. I think I don't think, at least my speculation is, I don't think it was an accident that the game before Penn State, Ryan Day's, one of his first comments after the game was, we wanted to see how well we could pass the ball. Like, I think they did use Wisconsin as, let's see what we can do when we go and really push the pedal offensively, so we can do this in 2 weeks against Penn State. So I expect, now it could go either way, because we've talked about it before. You think back to Texas, Washington, Illinois, when he's talked about these bigger games. I mean, he said it all week, like, this is a matchup game. They still have great talent. Like, he is not talking down whatsoever on Penn State despite its 4 straight losses. And so they are certainly playing this up to their players like this is still a huge game and we have to play our best. So certainly the number one focus is going to be win the game. But I do think that, this is not going to be a game where if Ohio State gets up 14-0, they're going to ease off the gas pedal and try to coast the rest of the way. I think if Ohio State gets up early, they're going to stay. I view it as kind of like the Indiana game last year, where I think if they can get out, I think they get out to a fast start. I think they're going to keep their foot on the gas pedal. And, if it's, if you're going into a fourth quarter and it's 45-0 or something, then maybe you ease up. But I do think that Ohio State's going to want to make a statement this week. I mean, it's the last big home game of the year, really. The only other home games you've got are UCLA and Rutgers. And so, you expect it. Yeah, it's a noon game, but it's still national TV, the blackout. They want the crowd to wear black. This is the game to kind of put on a show for your home crowd. I mean, under the new college ball playoff format, probably going to have a first round bye if things keep going the way they're going. So probably not going to have a home playoff game this year. So this is kind of like, in some respects, like your last chance to really put on a show in the shoe this year. And then you add in that extra kindling of Jim Knowles being on the other side and him leading a defense that has not lived up to expectations this year. I do think that Ohio State's going to want to make a statement, and I think they're going to be aggressive in this game.
Well, in drawing the comparison to the Indiana game last year, in the same way that we saw Will Howard celebrate by miming the extinguishing of a cigarette into the turf, I don't know. I know that we struggled to find some way to symbolize the Knowles era here at Ohio State. That's what I was getting at. I think we settled on maybe the coffee thing could be the Knowles symbolism. So perhaps we'll see Julian Sayin dump out a mug of coffee at the end of this game.
I don't know if I would love to see that from Julian. Like, I don't know if I feel like that's more something I see like Jermaine Matthews or someone like that doing, but I would love to see that from Julian.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they choose to celebrate their victory and how petty Ryan Day can get with it if it does go with that direction. But in terms of the nitty-gritty details of how we do think the game is going to go, Dan will be back with us for the Friday show to preview the Ohio State-Penn State game, and we'll be sure to get all the way into what our scoring predictions and whatnot will look like for how we think this game is going to go when the time comes for that. Until then, we will be back tomorrow with Andy Anders to talk more developments surrounding the team heading into the weekend. Until then, thanks for tuning into the 11 Dubcast, and thank you to our sponsor, First Bank of Central Ohio. We'll be back tomorrow morning, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then. Take care, folks.